Hello, everybody. We are live, finally back with Band of Brothers Part 2. And I want to really thank you, Tony, for putting together that awesome intro for our now, I guess it's an ongoing series after we get done with Band of Brothers, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes, it will. I had a lot of people like on Patreon and social media after Band of Brothers Part 1 saying, this show can't end after you finish talking about Band of Brothers. And I was like, funny you should say that, because you and I had a brief conversation after the show going, dude, when we're done with this, let's start talking about Colditz and Black Hawk Down and Zulu and all this other stuff. So
yeah,
I don't know how frequently, maybe every couple of weeks on the week opposite to when I do the 3 POA or something like that. But I had such a good time on the last show. So
yeah, I did too, and I've watched it a few times again, which I normally don't go back and rewatch. I'll rewatch like some videos that I make that I'm really proud of, but I often don't rewatch a lot of streams. You know, I try and devote that time to other channel streams, like streams you do with 3 POA and other channels that I like, because it's like if I'm just listening to my own stream, it's like I'm listening to my own voice, which is really weird. Nobody wants to find out that their friend or somebody they admire likes listening to the sound of their own voice. So it's like, but yeah, so we are to everybody out there listening and who's joined the show tonight, thank you. We are going to be continuing this after Band of Brothers Part 3. Those are multi-parts because it's a TV series, a miniseries. Tony and I have decided that unless the movie ends up being like 5 hours long, we're going to try and make movies a single episode each, so that we can, deliver a lot of different content to you guys. Nobody wants an 8-part series on a 90-minute movie. All right, I don't think anybody needs to do that. We have a few super chats already that I just want to get through real quick before we start the show. Vargo, thank you so much. He says, stuck at work, so I won't be able to be in the chat. Gotta love tax season, but I will still be listening along. Here's to another great show. Thank you, sir. And Jim Largo says, thank you so much for the kind super chat. He says, any excuse to see Michael and Tony hanging out together is a good idea. Well, thank you so much. That's very kind.
Awesome.
Yeah. So I prepped some media to start off our show because there were some visuals that I wanted to have in the last episode, the first episode, that I didn't manage to get. So real quick, I just thought that I would sort of give everybody kind of a recap of Band of Brothers episodes 1 through 3 very, very briefly. Like, here's how fast it's going to go. They trained for D-Day, they jumped on D-Day, then they took a town during D-Day. But as part of that, you might recall us saying, everyone, that David Schwimmer played their original commanding officer, Captain Sobel, and they hated him, and he was kicked out. And at one point, Tony and I mentioned how bad he was in the field at making decisions in real time. So I just wanted to play this clip for you guys real quick.
I think we should sit tight and let the enemy team come in our killing zone.
They're right out there somewhere. Let's just get them.
Sir, we have perfect cover here.
Sit tight. Deploy your troops.
It's funny, but it's not funny, but it's funny. Yeah. And so they stage a mutiny. They get rid of Sobel, even though at great risk to their own military careers and lives. The NCOs stage a mutiny. And then we have D-Day. And we've already been through that. But Tony and I talked a little bit in the last episode about the beautiful opening, not opening shot, but the beautiful shot of Winters jumping out of the plane on D-Day. And I just wanted to play a clip of that real quick.
Let's go!
Now that will probably get me demonetized, whatever. So moving on, Tony, we are now past their first mission. Some of them have not made it through those missions in the few days after D-Day. And they're all taken back off the line to England for rest and recuperation as they prep for their next big paradrop, which was really the last major Allied paratroop drop of the European theater, if I recall. Yeah, Operation Market Garden. So the next episode after Carentan is, I believe, Crossroads, if I'm not mistaken.
Replacements.
Replacements. That's right.
Yeah,
that's right. I'm totally forgetting about. Yeah, I have the clips ready for it, and I'm totally forgetting about it. So let's talk about Replacements. Walk us through a little bit about the premise of that episode.
Well, it's twofold. So obviously, first of all, it's the factual history of Operation Market Garden, where the airborne dropped into occupied Holland. But it's also the story of this unit that has come off the front line, having suffered massive casualties and losses, to then have a whole heap of replacements join them. And it must be just something about the military, like from my own experience, when you pass selection and then you are assigned to a squadron, and you turn up, you're the new guy again. Nobody wants to know you. But this would have been elevated so much more, because for these guys, it's like they didn't want to get attached to anyone that they, you know, as I can't remember who it is, as one of the guys says in the interviews, gosh, I just didn't like to see them get killed.
Yeah.
So the story in this particular episode is about those new replacement troops trying to integrate into Easy Company. You know, they haven't been battle tested yet. And then, of course, they drop into Holland, and it's actually the initial drop goes perfectly. It's a beautiful sunny day, landing in open fields. They've had the experience of the Normandy drop. So I really like that scene before they leave the airfield in England, where Bull Randleman is going round to the guys telling them, you don't need that, sling your rifle like this. And that's, you know, he's done one combat jump, and you look at all those things he learned, and the sergeant's just going around saying, yeah, you don't need to carry your M1 in this massive canvas bag, just get rid of it. You know, so
right. Yeah, they're trying to get these guys. I guess it's impossible to get somebody confident about what they're going to encounter when they've never done it before, whereas all the guys from Toccoa have already done one combat jump in several days of infighting in the hedgerows. Or not infighting, sorry, but several days of fighting in the hedgerows. Infighting would be arguing in the hedgerows. After D-Day, we spent 3 days just arguing with each other in the hedgerows. We're very experienced now. But as part of that, I think one of the scenes that I found the most telling was when they're all drinking and throwing darts and relaxing in England, and Garnier and some of the other guys kind of start giving the new replacements crap. You know, they're hazing them a little bit about, you know, being newbies and all that stuff. But Cobb starts lighting into James McAvoy, of all people. Yes, everyone. James McAvoy, young Professor X. He lights into him about the unit citation that's on his uniform and says that was for D-Day and you guys weren't there. And so he starts shaming him for it. And then Bull Randleman comes over after the replacements are embarrassed. They leave the table. And then Bull Randleman comes over and he's like, hell, Cobb, you weren't on D-Day either. He's like, you got hit in the plane and didn't make it. And then he immediately looks at the other replacements and he's like, I got hit, in the plane. I was there to jump. I couldn't jump because I got injured. And it's weird to me because that's the moment where we start to kind of get to know Cobb a little bit and his personality. But I can't really figure out how the episode tries to balance it out, because Cobb will play a role throughout this episode. And I'm curious what your thoughts are about his whole thing at the very end, because it seems like this is the episode that tries to give him a slight character arc. He's not the main character, but he's a featured character in this whole thing.
Yeah, and he gets a lot more screen time in, is it episode 8, I think, when they're in Hagenau. I mean, for me, that whole thing about like a presidential unit citation, like that's not something that that happens in the British military or the Australian military. Like British regiments will have flags with battle honours on them, which is like the history of the regiment. But no soldier would be able to wear some kind of a citation for an operation that he was not involved in. So you don't get like a unit citation, yet you all wear that patch because once upon a time these other guys did some stuff. But yeah, I think what they're trying to depict there is they're not, the guys like Randleman and that, they're not angry at Cobb because he wasn't there.
Right.
They're angry at Cobb for addressing the replacements the way he does, you know, under false pretenses, kind of, so to speak.
Yeah,
so,
kind of being a hypocrite in some ways.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They don't suffer fools.
Yeah, they do not suffer fools, especially after what they've been through for the past better part of 2 weeks, probably, or more.
Yeah.
So then we find out that Operation Market Garden is going off. First, we see it being addressed to them by Major Sink, Colonel Sink. Colonel Sink is addressing them about the plan, and then that's just the officers. And then Lieutenant Horton, who's going to be taking over, addresses. No, it's not Lieutenant Horton. Lieutenant Meehan, if I recall. Is that right? No.
No. Meehan went down in the plane on D-Day.
That's right. Meehan was the one giving them the plans for D-Day. But we do see them. There is a sequence where they're talking about the plan for Market Garden and what the idea is. That's right. It's the one where they're talking about we have to take these bridges within this amount of time. Yes. And there's a timetable because the armor and the basic infantry are coming up behind you. So you guys, you and the British para are all dropping in at different locations to take key bridges. And you've got to take key towns. And they do the jump. Like you said, the Bull Randleman and all the guys are letting the replacements know about little tips and tricks, how to carry your rifle, how to make sure that you've got this position this way. And, you know, so when you jump, everything goes smoothly. And just like in history, the jump on Market Garden was a photo perfect jump that everybody landed exactly where they were supposed to. It was a bright sunny day in the spring of the fall of 44. And the problem that they didn't anticipate, which I have an image of here, was that the Belgian townspeople and cities were so excited to be liberated that they actually ended up holding up the advance because they were all out in the streets, keeping everybody. They were celebrating and keeping everybody's convoys from moving forward. So their timetable is now behind, and they've got to play catch up. So if I recall correctly, and keep me honest here, that's when they finally approach Eindhoven, if that's correct. Is that right?
Just after that. So it must be the...
Oh, yeah, Eindhoven was the city that was holding them up. That's right. And then beyond that, So they show up...
I'm really glad you pulled up that photograph, because I was trying to find a clip to send you from this scene. So initially... Dick Winters in this scene, I think someone comes over and maybe puts some flowers around his neck, and he kisses the woman on the cheek, or she kisses him. But in this scene, there's a lot of detail going on here that, you know, perhaps non-military guys aren't picking up on. Dick Winters is an officer.
Right.
He shouldn't be carrying an M1 rifle. He should have a map case. But what you see in this scene here, I think he's got a little bit like myself. He's got the top button undone, and you can see a white T-shirt. He's got binoculars or field glasses.
Right.
And in this scene here, I think he uses his binoculars or something. But then you see him stuff the binoculars inside his jacket. Right. He does up the top button to hide the white T-shirt, camouflaged. He carries an M1 because he doesn't want to look like an officer. And from books that I've read, Dick Winters does have a map case sewn into the seat of his jacket.
Right.
Because map cases, field glasses, and M1 carbines make you look like an officer.
And they make you a target. Right.
Which, who's the guy in the next scene?
Yes. And I have that clip that you sent to illustrate that real quick. Thank you, Werewolf by Lunchtime, for the nice super chat. He says, perfect breakfast viewing here in muggy Perth. And let me just make sure I haven't missed any others. Brian Dillingham sends a Dillinghamism. He says, buy war bonds. All right. So I have that clip here. Let me pull up this clip. They're approaching the village outside Eindhoven. They're past Eindhoven and they're approaching this village. They're being understandably cautious. And this is what happens.
They get a load of General Patton.
What the hell's he doing?
He's quite a target, don't he?
Yeah, bring up the tank.
Lieutenant!
And we all know what happens next. If we've seen the episode, is that he turns around like Biscuit, and then suddenly he's shot by a German sniper in the neck, and he hits the ground. And it's because he's standing out there, like you said, looking like an officer with his glasses and his, all of his stuff, and he's got the stripe on his helmet and everything. And yeah, he's making himself, and especially being away from the tank, like he's what is your crap? Sorry about that. I accidentally hit the space bar. What is your take on this particular battle? Because it's obviously it's the next episode after Carentan. I find this battle to be just there's a suspense to it that it's not superior to Carentan. It's different from Carentan because this battle sets up the fact that they don't speak the language, but they can see that the villagers, the locals, are trying to tell them something. And they're not sure if it's, please come liberate us, or go away, we don't like you, or go away, it's not safe. There's this whole thing with that. I mean, as a guy who's been in it, how do you interpret those situations in real time? Like, when do you know to pull back versus know, okay, I think we can go in here a few more feet, or a few more meters or something like that.
That's a really interesting question, and I hope I'm about to deliver a quite interesting answer. So, what we call in the British military atmospherics, it is the things that you pick up on when you're kind of moving through an area, and we talk about the absence of the normal and the presence of the abnormal. And what I found over my time in, I spent a long time in Iraq. I was there on and off for over like 4.5 years. My first probably 18 months there, I really struggled with that because I didn't speak the language, but also because I would move around a lot. Baghdad I spent sort of 6 months there. That was very different to WWII. But then I ended up working out of an Air Force base in a place called Talil, and I stayed there for the next 3 years. And after a good 6 months, I got very, very good at judging the atmospherics in different areas because of my experience of continually going back there. And I could tell from, the body language of the people, or moving into an area and seeing no women and children. Right. You could drive through certain cities and they would let pigeons go off the roofs, and that was signaling to insurgents. And I would immediately, I was a team leader at the time. I would call up and on the radio and tell the guys to change route. So what's going on here? Because they haven't got the experience of operating in this country before. The terrain is different, as you'll see from the steep ditches on the side of the roads. Right. They don't speak the language. It is very, very challenging, and your heart skips beats for very often. I can remember long periods where I just felt like my ass was clenched tight for months, through tension and fear. So, I hope that was an interesting answer.
Oh, it certainly was. Jim Largo, thank you for the super chat. He says someone needs to let the Steel Brigade commander know that the golden helmet is a really bad idea in the field. And then Wes Robinson, thank you for the super chat. He says, thank you both for making the end of my week amazing. Glad to hear this will be an ongoing thing. Yes, sir. Absolutely. So I'm gonna get you know what my goal is for this live stream series. I'm gonna nuke the word "so" out of my vocabulary once and for all. Somehow I'm gonna do it. They're now approaching the village, and it's made very clear from what's just happened to their commanding officer that they are not alone, and that the people who are there are German troops that do not want them there.
Yep.
I have some clips here that I'm trying to figure out exactly what order to show them in, but I guess the first clip I should show is you and I both, I think, know what's coming, where they are now aware there is an enemy presence in the village, and they're approaching with a certain amount of caution. And the ground troops, Easy Company, they spot German armor. Yep. And they decide to warn the British tankers, hey, there's German armor right by that building, right beyond that building. It's hiding there. And the response, which I will just let the clip speak for itself.
Put a couple shells through that building. You're going to see him real good. I can't. My orders are no unnecessary destruction of property. I'm telling you, he's right there. Well, I believe you, but if I can't see the bugger, I can't bloody well shoot him, can I?
Now, I've looked at this scene a number of ways, and I've read my history books, and I'm trying to kind of parse everything because I'm so used to, this is why I'm trying to give Band of Brothers the benefit of the doubt, because on the one hand, I recognize that it's an American production of Men in Combat, but on the other hand, it was produced over in Europe, and a lot of the actors are British actors. But at the same time, yeah, right. But at the same time, I'm going, okay, I know that American productions of older war films kind of love to, I shouldn't say love to, but they fall into this trap of presenting the British a certain way. And I'm like, okay, I don't.
Or in the case of Saving Private Ryan, not representing them at all.
At all. Right. Very true. Which is why The Longest Day is still better than Saving Private Ryan. Fight me on that. Not you, the audience. You killed it. But yeah. But the way I'm looking at this, the Belgians, like so many countries like France and everything else, they were already invaded by the Germans. A lot of destruction happened when the Germans took over. You know, in France, there are entire villages that were wiped out just as revenge or spite or to make a statement by the Germans. So I can understand the very distinct possibility that orders would come down saying, hey, the Belgians have helped us in their resistance groups. They've helped us, you know, all along the way leading up to this day, and we're trying to liberate them. The last thing we need is a bunch of built up resentment because we destroyed a bunch of their stuff trying to liberate everything. On the other hand, I totally understand the point of, if we're going to get everybody's countries back, we have to defeat the enemy. So we need to do that as quickly and as efficiently as possible, which will involve the destruction of structures, property, things like that. What's your sense of that? Like, what is the right move?
Well, again, I watched this mini series when it first aired on British television, which was, as I found out the other day, it was October of 2001, a month after it premiered in the States. So at the time, I had done 4 years in the Australian Army, combat engineer, but didn't really go anywhere, not any kind of real experience. So I remember watching it at the time in 2001 and just going, oh, they have to take a jab at the Brits, don't they? Looking back years later with my life experience, I'm like, no, that is how British officers will follow rules exactly as they're told in the regular army.
Right.
Special forces are very different. And what's really telling here, going back to what I was talking before about Richard Winters carrying a different weapon to what the other officers carried, sewing his map case in the back and all of that. In the British military, he would not be allowed to do that. There are rules and regulations and dress code, and an officer would have to carry this and carry it in this way. So it just shows that I actually think this scene speaks a lot about the 501st Airborne. It was a newly formed unit. It was a revolutionary kind of tactics, and that bled into the way the guys on the ground would think outside the box and
and you're
come up
right.
with new ideas.
Yeah, and you're right, because it's the 101st Airborne with their new paratroop tactics of jumping into enemy territory surrounded and being trained how to improvise versus, like you said, regular army who are all taught, and that actually, tracks over into, as we'll see later in this discussion, the whole thing with Bastogne as well, where the regular army are running for their lives. And the paratroopers are like, why are they going in the wrong direction? Like, what's going on? So yeah, that definitely makes sense. And especially, I think, when you add in the fact that order probably came down from, we need the people behind us when we come back in to liberate them. We need their cooperation. We need them to be, so I'm sure on some level there was some pressure at the administrative and leadership level to say, if we can minimize destruction of property, we really need to try. Like and then what they find out, of course, within seconds is that not only do the Germans not care about that protocol and never did, but they vastly underestimated the German presence in this village. And it's got armor, it's got half tracks, it's got, a battalion there, whatever you want to call it. I'm not sure exactly how big that would. Yeah.
Machine guns up on the roof, machine gun nests on the roofs of buildings. And this is the first time that we see Easy Company retreat.
Yes.
They've not had to, they've not had to do that before. And obviously Bull Randleman, after he takes a piece of exploding tank in the shoulder, gets left behind enemy lines overnight. I read the book a long time ago, and I can't remember how much of Bull Randleman's night behind enemy lines is factual.
Right.
I wanted to ask you, how the first time you watched this series, how did you feel about those scenes of him kind of in the barn, and then he's in the barn at night, he's hiding, and some German soldiers come in, and then they walk out, and then one of them finds the bloody bandage on the floor and stops, and he had a fight. What's your recollection, or maybe if you don't remember the first time, how do you feel about those scenes?
Oh no, I remember watching it the first time. This is one of those series that, for guys like you and I who love military history, it basically brands your brain with almost everything that happened in it. Obviously, everybody listening, when you're talking in real time and you're trying to remember things, sometimes it sounds like I don't have a memory for it, but trust me, in moments of quiet, I can recall all kinds of minutia about this show. You guys give me pressure to entertain you, and it makes me kind of get a little bit. But I remember thinking at the time that I was seeing the night that he was trapped in that village, and he's in the culvert, he's in the
initially,
yeah. And then he gets to the barn. All of that stuff, I felt like, oh yeah, this is pretty plausible. Now, I'm not about to say that what happens next isn't necessarily plausible, but it did feel at first like this could be, we need to build a theme here of villagers who've been victims of constant invasion and reinvasion, always just by default being afraid of soldiers and afraid of warriors and combatants. I would like to revisit, because I've read the Band of Brothers book, as you have. It's been about 2 years since I read it. So I need to go back and reread it again. But everything those guys went through, and the randomness of war, as we talked about in the last episode of this, how war isn't just shooting. Sometimes war is just sitting around and then some guy walks by in a kangaroo costume in a blown up village and you don't know why. And you're like, you wouldn't believe me, but there we were in, Cologne after the, liberation, and a guy just goes running by in a kangaroo costume. Like, that's not a real story, guys. I'm just saying that's the kind of random stuff that happens. I guess what I'm saying is I wouldn't be surprised if something along these lines occurred where some villagers tried to help him that night stay hidden. And then the next, but it certainly made for suspenseful television. And I don't think it was completely out. It wasn't far-fetched in any sense of the word. Like, it wasn't something that pulled me out of the reality of the story, I guess is what I'd say. But what did you think? What was your take on it? Like, because maybe...
So the villagers helping him out, that was kind of no issue for me. It was, and again, I wish I could remember from the book kind of how much of it is true, because I'm not certainly, if Bull Randleman had a rifle bayonet fight with a German soldier in there, I don't want to try and claim that he didn't, but just the way the whole thing was kind of set up, that he's got this white bandage on his shoulder with blood, and it just drops right in the middle of the barn. It's like, I've seen that in so many other films. That is the bit that took me out, is then when the 3 or 4 German soldiers come in, then they go to leave. One of them sees a bandage and stops and stays. And it's like, the first thing you do when you see that is run off and get your friends. You wouldn't. Right. So I felt like that. I picked up on the vibe that some dramatic license was kind of being taken in that scene. I don't know if anyone in the chat knows how kind of factual that is, but I mean, just the fact that he spent a night behind German lines.
I'm owing the audience an apology here. Jeff72, you are correct. The reason I keep saying Belgium is because 2 reasons. First of all, in preparation for this episode, I went and read Alex Kershaw's book, about Battle of the Bulge, between the 2 episodes that we just did, because I wanted to get some context for the episodes that we're really about to talk about here in the next few minutes. And between that and the arrival of the British TV show Secret Army, which I've also been watching, which is set in Belgium, I got Belgium on my mind, man. Belgium's on my mind. So Battle of the Bulge takes place in Belgium, Bastogne's in Belgium, and all that kind of stuff. So that's why it's on my mind. So we are presently, for everybody, I'm retconning the earlier part of the discussion. Yes, we are in Holland. Sorry about that. I've just got so much World War II stuff in my head right now. I'm just a little confused.
I've been saying Holland during this, and I've heard you say Belgium, and in my head I'm going, I don't want to pull Michael up on this because I might be the one that's wrong.
No. I have no problem admitting, like, I know for a fact that Holland was part of Operation Market Garden. Like, I'm not a complete, numpty, but at the same time, I got so much rattling around up here trying to, remember facts and figures and draw from the TV show and connect it to real history and stuff, that sometimes you just get in a mode. Mark Jacques, thank you for the super chat. He says, great content, gents, from a retired British Army living in the U.S. Wow. Well, I hope you're enjoying your life here, sir.
Thank you.
So yeah. Wolfie says, occupied European country X. Yeah. Jason Anderson, me slowly Googling Belgium, not in Holland. And then Bobby Vala, thank you for the super chat. He says, I think I need to put
Bobby.
Spears. I think I need to put Spears in the Action Force line. Ooh. Oh. I mean,
Grace, I need a mop and bucket.
Mustat, we will be talking about Belgians in a moment, sir. I just explained it all. I'm not going to explain it again. All right, so I said so. I'm going to get that out of my head. Before Bull Randleman is in the midst of Bull Randleman being left behind because he's trapped between a burning tank on one side, and he's trying to get away from it as it rolls into the culvert that he's trying to crawl his way to safety from. Easy Company has to retreat from Eindhoven, or the village outside Eindhoven.
Yeah.
I have some clips here to show. So here we go. Hold on a second. If I've acknowledged it, there's no reason to check me on it, man. I acknowledge that I say so too much. All right. All right, here we go. Everybody's got to be a clown. Everybody's got to be a clown.
Infantry everywhere! Repeat! Armor has cut the road! We are covered in infantry! We are pulling back! Let us fall back! Let us fall back!
I find this battle, like I said at the beginning of this discussion, to be very harrowing in a different way from Carentan. Because it is Carentan, they knew they had to take the objective just like here, but they also seemed to have a little bit better intelligence as to what forces they were going up against. And they had their tactics down and everything played out largely the way they expected. Whereas this, the way they filmed
Excuse me 1 second.
Sure.
Okay. One of our cats was asleep in this room and I didn't realize, and they've just woken up. George, come on. Get out. George. This is fun. I'm live on camera.
I can't see what's going on camera, but go right ahead.
Yeah, no, the cat just woke up and I need to get him out of the room. Otherwise you'll hear a bell all the time. Okay.
We have an unknown quantity. We have an X factor of German resistance that we are discovering in real time. The way it's filmed, we're discovering it right along with Easy Company.
Yeah.
And it just keeps getting worse and it just keeps getting more desperate. And I think the way I remember viewing it the first time, it was, I guess the best way to describe it is harrowing. Because these are our heroes. We just saw them an episode ago or 2 episodes ago take Breakcourt in a textbook fashion. You know, and then they took Carentan, and now suddenly they are on the back foot. And you know, if you know anything about history, everybody out there, everybody on the Allied side of Market Garden found themselves on the back foot. Look up Major Robert Kane at Oosterbeek if you don't know much about this engagement. Just look him up. Trust me, it's a great story, but it's harrowing.
Is that Jeremy Clarkson's grandfather-in-law or something?
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he did. Jeremy Clarkson did a wonderful documentary about that guy. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. All right.
There's one scene in this kind of withdrawal that really sticks in my memory, and it's you've got Cobb behind a kind of waist-high brick wall with the grease gun, you know, and he's kind of firing the grease gun over the top, and a heap of retreating Easy Company troops come running past him, and he kind of stays there under this wall, and then an artillery shell hits the wall, it explodes, and then moments later, kind of as the dust settles, you see him just sort of curled up in the corner, and it's missed him by inches.
Mm-hmm. I thought I pulled that clip, actually. I know I had it. I thought I had the whole clip. Please tell me I've got it. I think I've got it at the beginning of. No, I don't want to play that one yet because it's got a little bit of the. I have part of that clip in this, but I thought I had pulled that whole clip. But I think what I ended up doing is choosing the other clip. I was literally choosing between those two, and I think it's because I took part of that clip for a quick montage that we're going to be using in a second to talk about a specific character. So part of it makes it in. But yeah, that moment where they're all behind that wall and they're telling Lieutenant Peacock, what do we do? And he's like, I don't know. And then they're like, we're retreating. We got to get out of here. And they all run. And Cobb is still using that grease gun to try and hold off the Germans that are advancing, and then that shell hits, and he's literally behind the only chunk of wall left. You know, just amazing stuff. Okay. Now we're in retreat mode. They're all regrouping on the road. They realize, before we forget, Buck Compton gets hit in the rear. in the rear. So Buck Compton's hit. This is going to rattle him for the rest of the series. This is going to be sort of the thing that shakes the confidence of Buck Compton. He's dragged off on a door and then gets into a truck. And when they all get back, they all realize that Bull is nowhere to be found. And so the replacements, Cobb, the guy who's real smart from Harvard, whose name I can never remember.
David
Webster. They all go back to look for him. And it's clear they didn't really need to, because Bull got himself out of the situation. And I'm just going to play this clip one more time as part of the retreat, just because it's too good, and I'm just going to play it again.
How bad? I don't know yet. Thanks! I'm all right. Am I all right? Yeah, you feel all right? Yeah, quit looking at me like that.
I just love that because it's real. I know it actually happened. And it's bizarre.
Yeah, and a real credit to the production as well is that he continues to wear that helmet with, I don't know if it's a hole or if it kind of dings off the helmet, or you see the damage on that helmet, into future episodes until he gets a new helmet.
Yeah, it's until he finally gets the quartermaster, catches up with them and he can get a new helmet issued. He's got that hole in the helmet. Now we're moving on to you want to move on to Crossroads, or is there anything else?
Yes, one of my favorite episodes. I mean, I like the fact that it's called Crossroads because, for so many reasons, it's the middle of the series.
Mm-hmm.
It's obviously the objective was a crossroads, but it's also the crossroads in Dick Winter's military career.
Yeah.
There's a lot going on in this episode. I really like the I don't want to say flashback because it's a bit more than a flashback, but the chopped up kind of sequencing where you kind of seeing Dick Winters with an orderly in an office with a typewriter, and like the sound editing that goes from typewriter keys to gunfire. Is really, really well done.
They get ahead of his promotion in the timeline, and then they go back and they kind of show you how everything led up to Winters getting the promotion.
Yeah.
And I know the Why We Fight episode is also somewhat stylized in its own way, but I feel like Crossroads is the most stylized episode from a cinematography perspective, because it begins with that hard, just the running and the frenetic, just POV, and you hear the breathing, you hear Winters just breathing as hard as he can. He's in a full sprint, and you're then flashing back to him typing the report, and then flashing back to what's happening. What is happening, everyone? Tony, would you like to walk us through what is actually happening in real time, temporal time at that crossroads?
Yeah, so I'm trying to remember. I think Easy Company have a small patrol goes out, and one of their soldiers gets wounded. So it kind of opens up with the wounded soldier being kind of brought back in, and then Winters going, right, everyone grab your gear, grab ammo, grab grenades. We're going to go out and find these guys that wounded our buddy. And initially, what happens? They're moving at night, and they're alerted to a German machine gun who's like firing down the road, but they don't even know what the guy's firing at. So he sets up a really clever sort of ambush where you actually see him going along the line, telling his guys first on the right, second on the right, third on the left, telling them all who they're going to shoot. And then it's a very short, sharp, violent engagement where they wipe out a lot of German troops, and then So I think then we flash back again to the present day where he's back in his office, doing the after action report. Then it's the following morning when the Germans now know that they're there somewhere,
right,
in the area, because they've wiped out a bunch of them, and Richard Winters realizes that once again they're surrounded and there's not much of a way out. So this pretty much platoon size, they're not much more than that, decide to one of the moments I like in this is he gives the order to fix bayonets.
mm-hmm.
I've never received that order outside of training,
and it didn't happen often in World War II either, especially not in Europe. It only happened. You can count on one hand on the Allied side, especially the American Allied side, and the number of times in Europe they were told to fix bayonets. For sure.
Yeah. Which is very interesting. The fact that in modern Afghanistan conflict,
mm-hmm.
The British Army have fixed bayonets multiple times. But it's that one command that you get from a leader. Having never experienced, I just know if my commanding officer turned around and said fix bayonets,
mm-hmm.
it's like I'm going on a suicide mission. That's what it is. It's you don't need to say it. So they obviously I don't think they actually do any bayonet fighting as such, but the fact that they're like, hey, we're charging at an unknown size force.
Mm-hmm.
One thing that struck me back when I first watched it though is Winters throws a red smoke grenade.
I have this clip, but go ahead.
Okay, let's go. No. Let's show the clip.
Okay. Before we do that, I just want to address Don Baca. In this particular instance, when Nixon was hit in the helmet by the bullet, that actually happened. That's not movie magic. In Band of Brothers, it is documented from the reports, the books, the journals, the memoirs. Nix was hit through the helmet with a bullet and lived. So this is not artistic license in this case. So here is the smoke grenade.
No, wait for the signal.
You have the floor, sir.
So when I watched this the first time, it was one of those moments where I thought, what's the logic behind that decision to throw a smoke grenade, run up there on your own to an unknown sized enemy force, and have you guys? Well, I couldn't wrap my head around it. So I was very pleased sometime later when I had read the book that's actually not exactly how it happened. It was Richard Winters had pulled the pin on the smoke grenade. He'd thrown the smoke grenade and said to everyone, we go on the red smoke. And he stayed there with them until the red smoke started to fill, it's covering their advance. And then they all got up. But Richard Winters says that he was like a man possessed. And when he got there gets up onto that mound and he sees the young German soldier, he's kind of looking around going, where the hell is everyone else? And it was just the fact that he ran so much faster than the other guys. He was, the fittest guy in easy company. He led by example. That's actually how it happened in reality. So, this makes it sort of a little bit more dramatic. It makes it seem as though Winters was there alone for a lot longer than what he was. I don't mind the artistic license that they've kind of done there, but I did remember at the time it was making me, in this very, very dramatic scene, I get taken out of it just slightly by going, why did he want him to wait?
It's not as bad as in Private Ryan when they send a medic up the middle to take a mortar position or a machine gun position. Like who sends a medic into that anyway, and who sends them right up the middle? So
especially an unarmed medic.
An unarmed medic, yeah. In this case, the way I interpreted it at the time, which also is not part of the fact-based finding, but I thought maybe it was the way they wanted to spin the scene for Band of Brothers. I always assumed that the grenade wasn't pushing out its smoke as fast as it was supposed to. Like, in other words, he thought that it was going to be almost instantaneous like it should, and it sputtered and kind of, and he didn't realize that they weren't just a few steps behind him. That was how I kind of wrapped my head around it at the time, before I'd ever read the book. They don't know really what they're facing on the other side. Yes, they've engaged them at night, the night before, but they're really not sure. And then, as is true to history, Winters didn't know what was on the other side of that rise. And when he gets to the other side of that rise, it's an entire SS division or something like that. Like it's just...
And then as the scene flows on, then all of a sudden, like a whole heap more of them come over the crest of the embankment and start piling down. It's just a turkey shoot.
Yeah, and Winters talks about how in his interviews they ask him, and these aren't just the interviews for Band of Brothers officially, it's also interviews other people have done with him, where they say, what were you thinking in that moment? You're the only guy standing up there. You've just got an M1 and there's just tons of German SS down there. What was going through your head? And he said, it felt like everything except me was in slow motion. He said it felt like I was moving in regular speed and everything else was just moving as slow as it could be. I'll never be able to relate to whatever he experienced there. I'll never know what that is, but thank goodness that he clearly had the 100 cups of coffee like Fry did in that episode of Futurama, and suddenly everything around him slows down and he's moving like the Flash. They take out they all catch up. They lay down a base of suppressing fire and they just have a turkey shoot with these SS troops. And then after that, and I'm glad you pulled this clip as well, because I'd already pulled the clip, but you pulled the clip as well. After that, he knows that they've got to send guys back to the regimental headquarters for intel. In other words, prisoners. They got to send prisoners back. And Joe Liepgott is he's playing a carnival game with any surviving Germans they could find. He's just shooting them where they are. And there's 11 prisoners. And so then this moment happens where he says to Liepgott, Winters approaches Liepgott.
You have one round. Johnny, how many prisoners do we have?
Got 11 right now, sir.
Okay. You drop a prisoner, the rest will jump you. I want all prisoners back at Battalion CP alive.
Yes, sir.
I feel like it's a great way to lead guys without, I don't know how to describe this, and you correct me, you keep me honest, but I feel like in that moment, and I understand that Liepgott as a historical figure did have this issue. Like I've listened to a lot of Major Winters memoirs, and yes, Liepgott was somebody he had to keep an eye on.
Yeah.
I feel like that was a great way to keep him within the rails without completely dressing him down in front of everybody. He's like, look, I'm going to give you some responsibility and it's important, but I'm also going to put limitations on what you can do so that you have to keep your wits about you too. You got to get these guys back, and I am giving you a challenge. It's a personal challenge. I'm not telling you what to do, but I'm telling you that now if you do it, you're going to be in a real, in a real world of hurt. And not from me. What do you think of that moment?
It's just an ingenious leadership decision. And it also rings true that in military training, you're always taught, when you're in a leadership role, to never ask your men to do anything that you wouldn't be prepared to do yourself.
Right.
And you just know that Richard Winters would be prepared to escort 11 prisoners back to battalion headquarters with one round in his rifle. So he's not asking anything overly extraordinary here. It is good. You're right. Just before that scene happens, he's basically, Liebgott's just laying down, just taking pot shots at these German soldiers.
Mm-hmm.
I also believe that is a great setup for the character that will lead us into obviously what happens in the episode Why We Fight later on.
Right.
You're already getting a hint that this guy hates the Germans.
Yeah.
And at the time, they didn't know about concentration camps and stuff.
Yeah.
So
he'd already been in that squabble with Garnier on the troop ship because
that's right.
Jewish and so he already knows there's a lot of anti-Semitism that I think everybody knew by that point that the Nazi regime was anti-Semitic, but they just didn't know the extent to which it had gone at that point. Yeah. Wes Robinson, thank you for the super chat. He says Winters was a colossal badass. He's such a class act of a man. Yeah, he's the kind of guy that when he's no longer on this earth, which he is no longer, the world feels it for sure.
Yeah.
Then we have Nixon coming out and I believe having a conversation. Winters asks him for a canteen of water and Nixon smells it because Nixon, of course, is an alcoholic and he doesn't know which one of his canteens has alcohol in it, which one doesn't. And he's like, yeah, this one's good, and gives him a drink of water. And then he starts to imply, I think there's some, obviously we're already ahead of it. We already know he's been promoted, but in that scene, Nixon kind of telegraphs that this is gonna, if I'm remembering it correctly, because then doesn't Sink go out to the area with him? And,
so I think Nixon, I believe, is kind of he's almost playing Basil exposition for a moment. Mm-hmm. So he's basically giving like an intelligence report to Winters, which is telling the audience that these guys were SS. There was kind of this many of them, and then after their conversation, then Colonel Sink calls him over, and it's like, how do you feel about heading up to battalion? And for Winters, he's losing his men. He's losing his company that the company that he got put in charge of on D-Day, and he's led these men through Normandy, Carentan, Eindhoven.
Mm-hmm.
The guy's been through a lot, and I think I'm right in saying that he never fired his weapon after that point of the war.
Right.
Never during the Battle of the Bulge or anything like that. And I was listening to a podcast the other day about someone was interviewing Richard Winters, Damian Lewis in the podcast. And he was saying that, through all of his conversations with Dick Winters about this, he very much felt like, okay, so I'm really, really good at this one thing, and you're going to go and put me over here and stop me from doing it anymore. It was very, very jarring to him, and I think he really felt like he should have stayed Easy Company's commander for the duration of the war. But obviously, through casualties and losses, people have to move, and then it sets off a very difficult period for Easy Company through other leadership.
Yeah, because they get a really competent lieutenant with Moose Heilinger. But unfortunately, after he helps the British para get back across the river in that one mission, which is very successful, Dick Winters is walking with him at night, giving him just some, tips and tricks about, Easy Company and how to lead them and all that kind of stuff. And a dumb sentry, I say dumb, but an inexperienced sentry tells them to halt, doesn't wait for their identification, and shoots Moose Heilinger multiple times with an M1. And then they have to race him off to, hospital. He's out of it for the rest of the war. I believe he's out of it for the rest of the war. If he did come back, wow. So that's when they're not forced, but that's when the fates align. They were about to find themselves in the Battle of the Bulge unknowingly. Nobody knew the Battle of the Bulge was going to happen, but they were going to find themselves in it with Lieutenant Moose Heilinger, but they end up finding themselves in it with Lieutenant Dyke.
Yep.
And I've done a lot of reading on this to prep for this segment of our discussion, our multi-part discussion, because Bastogne is a multi-episode. It's a multi-episode chunk of this miniseries. It's the whole middle act. And at the same time, Dyke is such an integral figure in how all this plays out that I wanted to know the real history. And I don't want to give too much away until we get to it. But just to say that in the real history of Lieutenant Dyke, it was very odd, they said, what started to occur at Bastogne. In reality, because Dyke was a decorated soldier of Market Garden. And I believe he also won some decorations prior to Market Garden. He had proven himself in combat, as well as in part of combat, saving wounded men off the line, bringing them off the line. He'd rescued men under fire as well. So that's in the background of the reality of what's about to occur. Buck Compton is out of the hospital from his incident getting wounded, but Winters is starting to figure out that Buck isn't quite the same that he was before. And they all find out that there is this major German offensive happening, and they have to get to the front of the line. And they have no winter clothes. They have no ammo. They weren't even planning for the 101st to go back on the line. They were getting them staged up to go take a break, and suddenly they're being thrust into the front of the enemy lines. Tony, walk us through that sequence where they're all herded into the trucks, and they hop out, and they pour gasoline cans into pits they dig in the snow to warm up because it's the coldest winter in a century or something like that. Walk us through that whole sequence of them seeing these retreating guys.
Yeah, so first, I do love the little moment where they are sitting in the back of the truck, cigarettes, and they're talking to some replacements about, how many pairs of socks have they got and stuff like that. And the reason I love that moment is because I've had so many moments like that in my own life, sitting in the back of army trucks, Bedford trucks, freezing cold, coming back from the Welsh mountains or something like that. So it's nice for me to know that not much has changed. But then obviously we get a cameo from Jimmy Fallon who turns up with some ammo. I'm pleased that I had no idea who Jimmy Fallon was at the time when I first watched it, because
I recognized him from SNL vaguely, but thankfully his performance is very understated, and he doesn't try to steal the show or anything like that.
See, I didn't watch Saturday Night Live or anything, so I didn't recognize him. Watching it now, it really stands out to me, because of the Jimmy Fallon show and stuff. But yeah, there's that little interaction. But first of all, we've got so Easy Company, had to withdraw from that village in Holland, but they had never seen like a mass retreat like this, where the soldiers coming back just looked like shells of human beings. I believe it's true to history that it was Garnier who just started saying, "Who's got ammo? Give me your ammo! Give me your ammo!" Because Easy Company were not going to retreat like this. But it shocked a lot of the soldiers to see this happen.
Yeah.
And then we get a nice little moment with, I think it's like Nixon, Norman Dyke, and Winters.
Mm-hmm.
And Norman Dyke he's complaining about something. I don't remember what it is. And Winters turns around and is like, "You've got bigger problems, man. You've got a company of soldiers go into the front line with no winter clothing and no ammo. Like,
Yeah.
go prioritize your issues. You know, prioritize the problems that you're facing."
Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, and it is the moment with Jimmy Fallon where he says to Winters, "They're about to cut the roads. You're going to be surrounded." And my favorite line from the entire miniseries, a line that I've actually used since in life. He turns around and supposedly this is completely true as well. The fact that he came up with this line on the spot, he's like, "We're paratroopers, sir. We're supposed to be surrounded."
Yep. I know. It gets you every time. It gets you every time.
It does.
Because the reality of it, it cuts to the heart of the matter of who they are and what they've trained for. It cuts to their every reason for existing is that simple concept. We are trained to be surrounded and win. I mean, kind of gives you chills when you think about it. You know, it's like, whoa.
Yep.
There is one bit here in the mass retreat of the general infantry that I did want to bring up. And it's something that's always weirded me out a little bit. And I don't know if it's simply because costuming departments being what they are. My understanding had been that most of the American side of the Allied forces had not yet gotten their winter gear because Patton had been moving so fast that the supply lines could not keep up with him. And so it became this ongoing issue. But in the line of guys that are retreating, you have a lot of guys that are in standard issue winter coats, like winter long coats. And I'm thinking, hell, like, yeah, ask for their ammo and their gear and stuff, ammo, weapons, food, whatever they've got. But why isn't somebody asking them for their coats? They're going back behind the line. Okay, so they're going to shiver for a little bit, but they're not walking toward the enemy. They're walking away from the enemy. They'll be back where those guys were when they got called, pressed back into service, unexpectedly. And, jumping out of the back of trucks instead of jumping out of planes, as they said. I was always wondering, like, if there were dudes with winter coats on, would they not have cannibalized those as well on the way in, given the shortages? I don't know. I haven't been able to suss that out. I'm not sure. But.
Yeah, it was quite jarring for me as well because they would do that because Easy Company are going to sit in foxholes.
Right.
Retreating men are probably heading towards tents where they can light a fire and things like that. It's the guys on the front line who can't light a fire because German snipers will pick them off and they're sitting in foxholes and but I mean it's quite staggering actually to believe that we have got in this one episode of Crossroads. There's so much going on here. To think that it's all packed in. And the episode actually ends with them grabbing the ammo and walking off to face the German war machine in the winter in the Battle of the Bulge. With everything that has happened. Yeah,
no winter gear, very little ammo, very little food. Some of the guys have snuck out of the hospital, like Popeye. He got back out of the hospital, Popeye got out of the hospital earlier than that. That's right. He got out of the hospital before they jumped into Holland. Notice, everybody, I said Holland. It's all good. Everything's good. But we're in Belgium now. We're all in Belgium now. Okay. I love the ending of that with the text. I'm not usually big on text endings, but I love that one because it's stark and it paints the picture. They're going in surrounded with no food, ineffective clothing, in a harsh winter and no ammunition, and they're going to hold off this German onslaught. One thing I want to point out to everybody listening: the reason that I read Alex Kershaw's book about the Battle of the Bulge is because it focused on general infantry during the Battle of the Bulge and their experience. And I want to make one thing clear: as much as this show is true to the history as it can be, it does make exceptions. And in this case, it's not an exception so much as it creates a perception issue where, yes, there were general infantrymen that were retreating from their positions on the line due to the German offensive. But there were many general infantry platoons that did not fall back and did not retreat and did hold their ground and did stay where they were, and often with tragic consequences. They were massacred. They were literally killed where they were, and the survivors were lined up and massacred, and all kinds of things happened. They were taken to prison camps. If you want to hear about the general infantry in the Battle of the Bulge, read Alex Kershaw's book on it. Highly recommended. So anyway, I'm trying to get so out of there. Anyway, we're moving on to the next episode, Bastogne.
Mm-hmm.
And I have an image here from the episode that kind of speaks to the whole theme of this episode. This is the episode that really focuses on Roe, the medic.
Yep.
And it's a very interesting way to position the start of Bastogne. But I also think it's a really brilliant way to do it, because what we're looking at here is we're looking at Roe and a French nurse, or she might be a Belgian nurse. I can't recall. They both speak French. That's what I do know. And he's having to constantly go back and forth between the line and the triage hospital that's been set up in the church, because he's got no supplies. Yep. He has no morphine. He has no bandages. He's constantly trying to find a pair of scissors. And he's running around to all these different people, all these different foxholes, sometimes accidentally walking into the German lines, which was a big problem in Bastogne, because you didn't know where the American lines ended and the German lines began. And so the next thing you knew, you'd be, and I believe that happens in this episode where Winters is trying to shave. He's literally punching the ice out of his water can to shave, which was a true to history thing, by the way. Winters talks about how he learned in officers training that you're always supposed to shave every day.
Yep.
Even though Colonel Sink thought it was hilarious when he finally ran into Winters at one point during the Bastogne campaign, and Winters' face was all cut up because he was trying to shave in the ice cold. And even Colonel Sink knew that in extreme circumstances such as this, you can kind of ignore that regulation.
But
he thought it was just great anyway that he was such a dedicated officer. But at one point, while Roe is asking Winters if he has anything to spare from his medical kit, Winters hears something, looks over, and sees a German taking a piss just a few meters away. He's completely unaware. And so Winters calls him over and has him surrender, which actually happened in history as well. Winters was not actually shaving at that point. They combined two elements of Winters' character into one scene to kind of get both things illustrated. But that did happen where a German wandered into their perimeter and Winters personally confronted him and had him surrender at gunpoint. So that happens. What do you make of this episode? This episode for me, Tony, is the hardest to watch. It's not by any, I don't mean that in the sense that it's a bad episode. I just mean that it's very hard to watch this one, because maybe it's because I'm not into incisions and medical stuff and, that kind of thing. So it makes me a little, but what do you think of this episode?
This is difficult to watch. I agree with you. I do find episode 7, The Breaking Point, the hardest episode for me to watch personally.
Mm-hmm.
It's a wonderful choice to have this episode be seen through the eyes of a World War II medic in the Battle of the Bulge. we haven't seen a lot of Doc Rowe in the series up until this point. The fact that this forest was filmed in a soundstage in England, still blows me away. But seeing like the first, I'm trying. These two episodes, 6 and 7, often blur for me because it's Bastogne, the Battle of the Bulge. So I'm sure they come under artillery attack in this episode.
Yes, they do. They do. Yes.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Just from a technical production perspective, expertly done. I had no idea this was filmed on a soundstage until a long time later. You know, when I saw documentaries and things like that. But there are some very challenging scenes in this. They go out on a patrol, and Doc's going to go with them. And I think it's Johnny Martin says to him, "Doc, you stay here on this one. You know, this is combat troops only kind of thing." And one of the young soldiers actually goes, "Am I right in saying these forests they were in were like plantations?"
Yes, so they were all in rows to the point they were so precise that everybody who had to fight in them was like, the Germans can see us a mile away because they're not random growth forests. They're literally manicured.
Yeah.
And so you can see right down each row. Yeah.
Yeah. So one of the really young soldiers, he gets told, okay, cross the row. And as he does, a German machine gun opens up and he takes a round in the throat and hits the deck. And they make several attempts to try and rescue their fallen comrade, but the German machine gun fire that's just strafing through, it's nobody is. You're literally talking 3 feet, 4 feet.
Right.
No one can get to him, and they have to make the very difficult decision to leave him behind.
I have the clip here.
What's happening, sir?
We're pulling back. We made contact. I gotta get to the CP.
Yeah, he's just you know what, 1.5 meters away from them, and they can't get to him because of the machine gun fire, and they're caught. They're caught in a German trap. Their only option is to retreat. Yeah, and the history behind that, of course, is that the guy trying to get to him was Babe Heffron, and Babe had promised that he would look after that guy. And then that guy said, you know, promise me that you'll, this is the real history of it. He said, promise me that if anything happens to me, that you'll let my mother know, you know, what happened, you know, because obviously she's going to get a letter from the War Department. And throughout his life, Babe Heffron talked about how it took him 12 years after getting back to summon up the emotional courage to call his mother. Like, it took him 12 years after the war. It wasn't that he was shirking the responsibility or got lost doing other things. He was just, he could not accept what had happened. And he felt so responsible, even though it wasn't his fault. Sobering series of events. Yeah. And I want to look here in the comments real quick. We have a super chat here. Thank you, Timothy. He says, I respect Band of Brothers, but I've never sat down to watch it. However, I'm going to keep pushing Bobby to make an Action Force World War II edition. Timothy, as somebody who's super chatted, I'm going to say this with quizzical respect. You want an Action Force World War II figure, but you've never watched Band of Brothers. I demand that you correct this immediately. I need you to find your attention span and watch this show. All right.
This miniseries, this 10-part miniseries plus the documentary, this to me goes beyond a piece of cinematic entertainment. This is a document of a time in history that should never be allowed to be repeated.
Right.
And I believe that episodes of this show will be shown in history classes in 150 years' time. People will still show this to 5, 6, 7 generations in the future. Well, I hope they do, but then cancel culture and all that nonsense.
Yeah, they in our country, there's a whole state that's trying to cancel the Holocaust comic Mouse from being available in school libraries, and they've succeeded so far. That just happens in the news all over here right now. And so like that's a scary idea that people, because it's hard to accept and it's hard to learn about and it's uncomfortable, that they're like, oh, if it's uncomfortable, I just don't want to know. And it's like, yeah, but you need to know, because if you don't, you'll walk right back into this situation again as a culture. Yeah. It's shocking to me. Sal, thank you for the super chat. He says, at work, nothing to say, just showing my love.
Thank you, Sal.
And Roe ends up in a number of situations. Hubler finally gets a Luger off of a soldier, and Hubler ends up shooting himself with said Luger on accident. It's in the pocket of his coat. Yep. And it shoots him in an artery, and he bleeds out, and there's nothing they can do. Roe is trying to get equipment, get provisions, get bandages, get morphine, get plasma, get things he needs. He keeps going back to the church triage unit where he's getting to know this nurse who he's helping out. They're trying to save lives. They're trying to, help these wounded men that are coming in on stretchers. But I find it really fascinating the way he goes between the foxholes. And so like he finds out that Joe Toy needs a pair of shoes. Yeah. And Joe Toy, his shoes got blown up because they were outside a foxhole during a shelling. He had to hop into the hole while he was trying to keep his feet dry, and the shoes got blown up. So he goes and he finds a dead man's pair of boots at the hospital in a pile of uniforms. He brings those boots back, with a thing of equipment. There's a successful airdrop at one point, and they're able to get equipment. And he brings back a few sort of crates, like hand crates of provisions. I can't remember I think this is in the next episode. I could be wrong, but is this the same episode where, actually this might be in the next episode where the guys are all talking about spears? I think that's in the next episode.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So at the end of all this, Roe, who's met this nurse, gotten to know her entire hospital gets bombed.
Yep.
And he goes racing back, and the only thing he finds is her headscarf. He finds her bloody headscarf, or I guess it's not bloody. It's just he doesn't know what happened to her, but this blue headscarf that you can see right here, he finds it in the rubble.
Yep.
And he takes it back as a reminder of her because he doesn't want to forget her. And at the very end of the episode, he has to use it as a bandage after a shelling to help somebody.
Yeah.
There's that moment of pause where he's like, I don't want, and then he's like, no, she was a nurse. I'm a medic. This is what we do. This is what she want me to do. And he,
you see, he takes it out of his pocket, sees it, and it takes him out of the moment of kind of treating the casualty. And he like, oh, I can't use that. And he goes to put it back in his pocket. And you see the realization on his face. And to me, it was always more kind of a, she would want me to use it.
Right. Yeah.
It was almost like from beyond the grave, she was telling him, no, use it on this soldier. He's hurt. Wonderful, wonderful little moment. I'm glad you mentioned Hubler earlier on. He'd wanted to get like most of the guys did. This show makes a big thing about Don Malarkey wanting to get a Luger, but actually all the guys wanted to get Lugers. Don Malarkey was just the guy who ran out in German machine gun fire at Breakhall Manor trying to get one. So Hubler gets the Luger after he shoots a German officer off horseback, which again, that scene is quite surreal, but that's the reality of warfare. Surreal things happen. He gets the Luger and then he accidentally shoots himself and severs his femoral artery and he bleeds out. And you see how quickly he bleeds out in the show.
Right.
That's what it is often like in reality. So I can remember doing a St. John ambulance first aid course as part of a civilian job that I had. And this would have been, in the late 90s. And you learn, I don't know if you're familiar with this acronym, Dr. ABC, danger, response, airway, breathing, circulation. And you're taught, if any danger, don't make yourself run in there. Then the response is the response from the patient. And then you start going, you're triaging everything, airway, breathing, circulation. So I'm kind of taught this on a civilian first aid course. Then during the modern conflict in Iraq and Afghanistan, when I got into the special forces and I start learning battlefield first of all, battlefield first aid and then trauma medical stuff. The danger bit, well, that goes out the window, doesn't it? Because you're in combat. So when you look at that acronym, the danger, response, airway, breathing, circulation's last. They learned very, very cool. And another thing I learned at St. John is that you don't use tourniquets because it cuts off the circulation to lower limbs and, people can end up having legs amputated. You don't use tourniquets.
Right.
I then go into the special forces and I'm learning battlefield first aid and they're like, no, you use tourniquets or people die. You've got to use tourniquets or people will die. If they lose a leg, they lose a leg. And the acronym had been changed in the British military to CABC. So the airway was not the priority. The first C is catastrophic bleeding. Because guys can bleed out and die faster than they, someone who's got, their tongues rolled back or whatever, or they're vomited and they're choking on it. You can resuscitate that.
Right.
You can't put blood back into people. So, I really just, I suppose, wanted to point out that scene for the fact that the speed with which Hubler bleeds out and dies is very, very accurate to how it can happen.
Yeah.
Especially that artery.
Yeah, I want to address this real quick. Sonny Frisch says the series has some historical inaccuracies, so its purpose for history lessons is questionable. Sonny, I was in this was in high school, okay? I did my Eagle Scout project at RAF Bassingbourn in England, where I restored the World War II Air Towers radio room for the 50th anniversary of the Memphis Belle's tour of operations, when Memphis Belle was there from 42 to May of 43. Or maybe it was 42 to 43, and I had the pilot of the Memphis Belle pin my Eagle Scout medal on me during the ceremony when the ribbon was cut. He flew over for that. That was 2 years after the movie had come out. I'm in America at high school, and I'm in history class. And a teacher named Miss Bedingfield suddenly brings up the Memphis Belle. Now, I haven't talked about this with any of my friends or students that were around me because they had no frame of reference about what I know about the Memphis Belle. And I've literally sat in the real plane. I have pictures of me at 11 years old sitting in the real plane. I'm coming to my point here, Sonny. Just bear with me. And she said, yeah, the Memphis Belle movie was wonderful. She said, however, like Hollywood does so many times, it messed up history. She said, because in reality, they didn't make it home. She said the plane actually crashed on its 25th mission and they all died. My point in telling you this, Sonny, is that sometimes you can't trust a history lesson from a teacher. And when I'm looking at what she just told me versus what Band of Brothers as a miniseries could be showing a student, I'm saying to myself, well, in this case, I would much rather have them just watch Band of Brothers than let this person teach one more minute of history.
Yeah.
you got to weigh these things, because I had to raise my hand and say, no. As a matter of fact, it's the complete opposite. The Memphis Belle is known as the first bomber in in the U.S. Army Air Corps in World War II to complete its tour of duty successfully and to go home. That's the opposite of everybody dying on landing on the 25th mission. She tried to fight me on it. I'm like, the plane is sitting in Memphis right now. Like, it's right. I've been in it. The pilot's alive. He gave me a medal. Like, what do you want?
Did you say to a counterpoint?
I know, right? So my simple point, Sonny, is that you got to weigh these things. And when Band of Brothers is getting it 80 to 85% correct, it's a safer learning tool than some teacher standing up there trying to tell you what they know out of a book. All right.
Yeah. One good example. I'm going to jump forward to something we'll be discussing in the third and final part of this kind of Band of Brothers discussion. In episode 9, where they come across the concentration camp, it wasn't Easy Company was there, but they didn't find the concentration camp.
Right.
So that is not completely historically accurate. But do you not think it is better for generations to know of what happened and what these concentration camps were like?
Right.
Does it really matter that it was actually some armored division that found that place? Like, if you want to become a history professor, yeah, you probably want your history a little bit more accurate. But to be able to tell what happened, yeah. I mean, my son turned 16 this year, and I've decided that, you know, starting on his 16th birthday, father-son time is going to be him sitting down and watching this series for the first time.
Sure.
He's never seen it.
Yeah, I think, for example, the episode Day of Days is something that should be shown in school. Like, if we just want to talk about historical accuracy, show them that. I mean, that'll give them a great idea of D-Day, for example. You know, you take the good with the bad in some of this. Timothy Hance, thank you for the super chat. He says, I have absolutely no response other than you're absolutely right. LOL. Again, we're all friends here, man. We're all friends here. Werewolf by Lunchtime, thank you for the super chat. He says, how can you ban mouse? I learned a lot from that as a kid, as did I. Got it from the book club and read it. It was something I'll never forget. Wes Robinson, thank you for the super chat. He says, these episodes are the hardest to watch as well. I can't even imagine how hard this would have been. It's sad to know that as hard as they fought against the Nazis, only to have them gain ground again. Thankfully, in the case of Easy Company, they gained no ground where they were. Thankfully, that is the case. All right, let's see. Going to go back to our story. So do we now move on from here to the next episode, sir?
The breaking point. Off the top of my head, I don't remember how this episode opens, but where we had episode 6 seen through the eyes of Doc Rowe, episode 7 is seen through the eyes of First Sergeant Carwood Lipton.
Yes.
Played by
Donnie Wahlberg.
A surprisingly good Donnie Wahlberg.
Yeah.
Surprisingly good. Wonderful, wonderful portrayal. Yeah, I don't remember exactly how the episode opens, but we're now deep into winter, during the Battle of the Bulge. The guys do finally have their sort of winter clothing, but, you know, they're living in foxholes and they're getting the absolute crap shelled out of them.
Yes.
With airburst shells. For anyone who doesn't know what an airburst shell, it's an artillery shell that does not detonate on impact. It detonates in the air. So the shrapnel comes down, which is obviously much more deadly when guys are in foxholes, because if an artillery shell lands and detonates on impact, the shrapnel kind of blows up and out, and unless you take a direct hit, you're protected. So I think when I watched this series the first time, you know, when it was on television, episode 9 with the concentration camp was the hardest episode for me to watch. Coming back now, this is the hardest episode for me to watch.
Yeah.
I spent about 3 months in a place called WWII, which is like an hour and a half south of Baghdad. And the place was called Camp Echo. It was like a forward operating base run by the Polish military. And a lot of the bases that we were using in Iraq were we were taking over old Iraqi army bases and things like that and airfields. They were often located some distance away from the local population centres. Camp Echo in WWII was on one side of the river and the town of WWII was on the other. And we spent a 2 to 3 week period practically under siege where the town was that dangerous. It was too unsafe to patrol the town. And we were getting daily and nightly indirect fire attacks. So Russian rockets, mortars were landing. This could happen in the middle of the day, in the middle of the night. And we had these concrete bunkers with sandbags all over them. What you were supposed to do when they had an alarm, trying to remember, I think it was called the CRAM alarm, the counter rocket and mortar alarm, could sometimes detect the indirect fire before it would land. So we would have a little bit of a heads up. But often it was, they could fire 20, 30 shells in the space of 30 minutes. You would hear although this was a Polish base, there was the American ODA there. So the Green Berets had a small compound. And you would hear the Americans would start firing back with mortars. And after a period of time of living through an experience like that, it's weird to say that I know the difference between the sound of an outgoing mortar and an incoming rocket.
Uh-huh.
You learn this. It's genuinely terrifying. And we had body armor, which these guys didn't have. Mm-hmm. We had Kevlar helmets, not tin helmets. We had concrete bunkers. But there was a woman, I want to say she was from Kansas, who was a civilian contractor who worked for, I believe it was Fleur. She had gone out to Iraq for 18 months because they were offering good money to work at Camp Echo and do the laundry. We had a laundry service. Soldiers and contractors didn't have to do their own laundry. So what you would do I think it was every 2 or 3 days, you would put all of your dirty laundry into a pillowcase, leave it outside your door, write your room number on it. And they would collect all the laundry, do the laundry, and a couple of days later, it would come back pressed and folded. During one of these indirect fire attacks at WWII, which happened during the day, this woman was carrying some soldiers' laundry across the basketball court when an attack occurred. She was hit. She took a direct hit walking across the basketball court carrying a soldier's dirty underpants.
Right.
I've seen what this does to people, which is why I find this episode very, very, I'm getting emotional right now, but
yeah,
but for the purposes of learning, I want to sit here and kind of tell my story. So again, one of these tragically surreal things that happened. I never in a million years thought that an experience that I would go through in Iraq would be helping to recover a middle-aged woman from Kansas whose sole job in Iraq was to wash people's clothes.
Yeah.
Working for a private contracting company like Fleur. So the kind of shelling that these guys went through, like we had better protection. We had an alarm that could detect it, and some wasn't foolproof, but it would give you some kind of a heads up. This episode's tough, and I remember the scene where First Sergeant Lipton, when they first come under fire, just before that happens, they're moving back into the woods, and I think it's Joe Toy jumps into one of the foxholes, and he's like, "Geez, the last troops who were here crapped in my foxhole." He's stepped in poo. And another guy sort of looking up at the devastation in the trees, where the trees are getting blown apart, going, "Yeah, Joe, I don't think they wanted to spend a lot of time above ground." And then as they're moving in, they come under attack, artillery attack. And Lipton's running around. He's telling you, take cover, get in your foxholes, This is the first we kind of see of him taking on that Easy Company leadership role, because as I think someone says in the show, Dyke is an empty uniform. Half the time you don't even know where he is. And at one point, Lipton goes down. I think like a bit of a tree falls on him, and the voiceover narration says it reminds him of the 4th of July.
Right.
Firecrackers going off and things like that. And I think he starts laughing or something. It's the first and only shelling he goes through where he kind of has that reaction. He then later sees the aftermath. I can so much relate to that, because I remember the first time I experienced what we call an indirect fire attack. Indirect fire because the fire goes up and down. It's not direct like a machine gun. So IDF, we indirect fire. It was not in D1E. I had that D1E was the worst I'd been through, because it was like daily and nightly for 2 to 3 weeks really. But I'd experienced it before at the US Embassy in Baghdad. And I remember the very first time it happened, I was almost overcome with a feeling of excitement almost, because mortar lands were landing near the compound or in the compound, but not near where I was. And it was one of my first experiences of being shot at. And I can remember like putting on my body armor and running over and actually almost going, I've got a story to go home and tell. I had this moment of excitement. After you go through something like what happened in D1E, and this woman was not the only casualty. This is a memory that has like a lot of these guys has haunted me ever since. I sometimes wake up, from our own private conversations on Messenger that I sometimes am up at 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning.
Yeah.
It's because I have dreams about things like that. And that's one of my recurring dreams. So I really relate to that, because he kind of had, he had never seen a display of firepower like that. And it was like a big fireworks show. But then afterwards, seeing what happens to his men, it starts to change him. And that's something that happened to me.
We have a clip from, I believe, the very first shelling sequence.
Incoming! Take cover! Take cover! Find some cover! Find a foxhole! Come on, take cover!
Yeah, it is shockingly well done, especially when like you said, that this was done artificially on a sound because they can't go back to Bastogne and say, "Hey, can we blow up your trees?" They can't do that. And in the midst of all this, we're seeing them play out that character thread with Lieutenant Dyke through the eyes of Carwood Lipton. And again, historical veracity being what it is, I want to make it clear that there are question marks still to this day about why Lieutenant Dyke wasn't the man he was in Market Garden when he took over Easy Company. In other words, this man did have, battle chops prior to this, and he was decorated for those in reality. Yeah. So with this happening, it's very odd that he would start to distance himself from the men, that he would start to not really make decisions, as Lipton tells Winters at one point. You know, he's not there. He's an empty uniform. He's not making decisions. That's the problem. There's a moment here immediately after one of the shellings that I think illustrates this as the way Band of Brothers wanted to deliver it.
Stay down! You stay down!
First Sergeant Lipton, you get things organized here. I'm gonna go for help. What the fuck?
I don't know. I have no clue if that particular exchange actually happened, but clearly they wanted to get this across to set up the idea that Dyke was not the commander they needed. He was not the CO they needed, the officer they needed for this.
Yeah. See, I was not aware until you've been telling us here in this episode about Dyke's history prior to this. And what strikes me now that I have that knowledge is that you know, he's portrayed a certain way in the series. A very likely possibility of why this was happening in real time is that by the end of this episode, we see Buck Compton removed from the front line due to what do they say? It's a serious case of trench foot. And basically, he is just a broken man and he can't lead troops anymore. Perhaps Dyke, in reality, was what Buck Compton would have been had they kept him with Easy Company beyond episode 7.
Right.
You know, perhaps he is already, severely shell shocked or PTSD, whatever you want to call it. They called it shell shock back in those days. In World War I, they called it lacking in moral fiber.
Right.
Yeah, how things change.
The shelling continues, of course, and gets worse. And it becomes, like Lipton says, then they started shelling again and it wasn't fun anymore. I have a clip here of Luz being caught out in the middle of a shelling. He's out of a foxhole. And Muck and Pinkala are trying to get him to get into there. And he's trying to crawl toward them. And this is what occurs. And that historically happened. Happened. They were both killed instantly when a shell went right into their foxhole. And there was nothing to find at that point. It was as seen in the film. And then the final moment of this, which I think is what's so masterfully done throughout Band of Brothers, is in the midst of all of this awful, horrible experience that we're now going through, they find moments where they can pull from real experiences, maybe not the real experiences of Easy Company in all cases, but real experiences of other guys that were in the war in those areas and throughout, and kind of paint a picture that for all the horrible stuff that happens, there's also random stuff that happens. And there's some funny stuff that can occur as well. Funny in a kind of dark comedy kind of way. And in this case, this definitely counts for some of the dark comedy. Because Luz makes it to Lipton's foxhole after that. And they're both sitting there just trying to stay out of, getting killed. And a dud shell lands inches from them. And then that's when I believe Lipton starts smoking. Like he takes a cigarette from Luz and starts smoking. Yeah. Also in the background of this episode, they bring back around. I think what's really well done about Band of Brothers, Tony, is that they never forget the character threads that they've seeded throughout the episodes. That characters that may feel incidental, even in earlier episodes, you're seeing those moments briefly because they're planting these character arcs. They're planting these ideas. And one of the ones is, even though he's never a major presence throughout Band of Brothers, really, when you rewatch the show, you find out how carefully they made sure to explain to you who Peacock was.
Yeah.
And in actuality, that Peacock's character, when I listened to Major Winter's actual memoirs, in addition to Band of Brothers, Peacock was brought up as a guy who, you know, he meant well, he did his job, but he just didn't have that thing. He didn't have that leadership thing. So I want to lead in with this clip that we played last time, where Lipton has gone to Winters and asked him or addressed his concerns about Dyke. He leaves, and then Winters has a conversation with Nixon about the problem. And the first part of this problem is right here, where he says, where is it? I got to find it. Oh, Lord. Did I lose it? I've probably lost it, everybody. It's here somewhere. Hold on. Oh, here it is. No, that's not it. Crap. I guess I don't have it, but there's oh, here it is. Here it is. Found it, everyone.
Division's not gonna let me replace him just because I got a bad feeling about him. Even if they would, who'd I put in his place? Shams?
Do not ever talk when I'm talking. You got that?
Shams seen too many war movies. Thinks he has to yell all the time.
So we went through that clip last time.
Yeah.
But he immediately goes on to the next possibility. And I wanted to set you guys up for this because this is not just this clip. I have created a montage real quick of showing you what he's about to say about Peacock. And then I'm going to show you moments prior to this where they seeded that idea before they get to this conversation. So here we go.
Or Peacock? God bless him, no one tries harder, but he's not cut out to take men into combat. I'm sure as hell not going to make him company CO, and I don't even want him as a platoon leader.
What are we gonna do, Lieutenant? I'm not sure. They're about to outflank us. We gotta get out of here. No, wait for the signal.
Peacock is a hesitant officer. He never wants to make the wrong decision. He's always, he's always like, I don't know what to do. And no. He said to wait. He has no ability to improvise at all. It's almost like he's afraid of getting in trouble or something, or he wants the A grade every time.
And in the previous episode, we showed the clip where I think his name was Julian, got shot in the throat, and they're getting strafed with machine gun fire.
Right.
Peacock leaves all the other guys there to deal with it, and he's the one who walks past Doc Rowe and goes, "We're pulling back. We hit their line," and boom, he's off.
Yeah, he's gone.
Another moment, another example.
Yeah, but I love how they don't forget to pick those. There's nothing that I'm sure if you forensically watch the show, something would get lost, but nothing quite gets lost. And then the other character thread that gets picked up in this, which goes all the way back to Day of Days, is they did it a little bit in Carentan, and now they're doing it again here, where the guys are still talking about the rumor that Spears killed all those POWs. So for those of you that didn't watch our original episode, Lieutenant Spears is from D Company, but he's constantly, or I should say constantly, he's regularly working with Easy Company on things, and he's constantly in and out of their sphere of influence. And so these guys, I've edited this a little bit so that the YouTube gods don't completely slam me. But these guys who are with Easy Company, Christensen and I'm losing the rest of their names, but it's Christensen and
there's a replacement, I think.
Yes, a replacement who they're telling the story to, and then it's not Pincala, it's the other guy. I can't remember his name right now.
Italian guy. I think he's brushing his teeth or something.
Yeah. They're telling this replacement, they're on either side of him, and they're telling him about everything they've heard about this rumor that Spears is like this psychopath that killed all these POWs. And he did it. The key thing you need to realize is that they're telling him, yeah. And you know what he did before he shot them all? He offered him cigarettes. Like he gave him smokes, and the replacement's like, whoa, that's crazy, and they're like, yeah, They've been borrowed for that one day by D Company. And at that moment, as they're talking about this, Spears walks up, and they didn't notice because they were caught up in their conversation. So here comes this moment talking about Spears. And you know what I really need to start doing? I really need to start having my finger. There it is.
Oh, well, actually, sir, Lieutenant Dyke said not even to bother. They're only going to be a 1 day.
Lieutenant Dyke said that, huh? I don't forget what I said. Oh, anyone care for smoke?
I love how all of this plays into what's about to happen next, because as many concerns as they have about Spears in the rumor mill of the general guys, the non-coms, or not just the non-coms, but the non-officers too, the privates. They don't ever confront him about it like we talked about in the last episode. They just kind of talk about it amongst themselves. But soon, that reputation combined with that reality is going to pay dividends for them as a company. We have to. I'm just going to make sure that I've covered all my bases here, and then we need to talk about the town of Foy, or as some people pronounce it, Foy.
Yeah, and so before the full-on assault of Foy, a few really beloved characters depart the episode at this point. There is another intense shelling where Joe Toy is caught outside his foxhole, trying to get to his foxhole, and he gets hit in the artillery barrage and gets his leg shredded, or completely taken off. It's a completely traumatic amputation of the lower leg. And when he kind of comes to a bit after the shock of that, what's he saying? He's like, "Where's my helmet? Where's my helmet? I need my helmet." And Garnier can hear that it's Joe, and I'm gonna go and help Joe Toy. So he leaves the safety of his foxhole to go and help his friend, and another artillery barrage starts, and Garnier, boom, he gets hit in the leg. His leg isn't amputated at the time; he gets amputated later, but he gets he gets hit bad. Probably the hardest scene for me of any film or TV show I've ever seen. I was in a vehicle that was hit by an IED. I used to sit in the passenger seat of the vehicle as the team leader. I would navigate. A roadside bomb detonated, and a large, I won't even call it shrapnel, it was a projectile, a large copper projectile, came in through the side of the vehicle at the engine bay, hit the engine. So it had basically come past the front of me, hit the engine, ricocheted off and angled down and took my driver's lower leg off. We then proceeded to crash the vehicle and to see when Buck Compton goes up, and I was telling you in preparation for this, you sent me the thumbnail, and I said to you, I would really like on the thumbnail to have that image of Buck Compton standing there dropping his helmet in the snow, but neither of us could find a good quality still, which is why it's not in the thumbnail. We didn't want to screen grab, just that pure, that's why this episode's called The Breaking Point. At that moment that Compton's soul is crushed.
Yeah.
He will never. I mean, he's been through a lot already, but he is never going to be the same again for the rest of his life after seeing two really beloved characters and friends of his like this. And he drops the helmet and he kind of mumbles at first as he tries to shout out medic. Doc Rowe arrives, and then I think it's Donald Malarkey.
Yeah.
Don Malarkey turns up, and Garnier looks up at him as his legs twitching, and he's like, "Yeah, they got old Garnier this time." And my recollections of this IED attack in Iraq is of my driver. You know, this had taken his foot off at the ankle. He ended up having later on to have the leg amputated, you know, at the knee. But I kind of went into I'm the team leader. I went into that kind of mode of deal with the emotion later, deal with the problem right now. And I'm getting my second in command to send the contact report back to operations, telling everyone to hit the panic buttons in their vehicles, which was a link to a GPS, and it would, you know, the big screen in the operations room, you know, 100 kilometers away would start to see my call sign Romeo 14 would start flashing red, all this kind of stuff. So I was not in I deal with the emotion later. But while we're waiting for the medevac to arrive via Black Hawk to evacuate my driver, I remember him sitting up. He was laughing and making jokes because he was worried about the pressure that I was under. Like, he's sitting there he's lost his foot, and that's like, you know, Garnier. You know, well, looks like they got old Garnier this time, and the way men can behave in these situations is inspiring. Like, I wish none of that had happened to these men, but the way they dealt with it, and particularly for the rest of their life, like Bill Garnier went back and he, with a leg missing, and worked a hard job for the rest of his life, was successful, and an amazing person.
Yeah. Now we're facing the town of Foy for the final assaults to retake Foy from the Germans, and this is where Lieutenant Dyke exits the story. Much like with Blythe, it is one of the larger inaccuracies in Band of Brothers, only in the sense that, yes, Dyke froze. He did freeze. That's completely accurate. He could not give orders, and Spears was chosen at first. Captain Winters, or is it Major Winters? I can't remember. I think he's a captain.
Still captain at this point.
Captain, yeah. Captain Winters, his instincts kick in, and he realizes that Dyke, who is behind this hay bale with his men, because he's not moving forward, the machine guns are zeroing in on them, and they're going to take casualties. And he's like, "You got to keep moving forward." And that's when I believe it's Colonel Sink. Somebody says, "No, that's not your job. You need to pick someone to relieve him.
Yep.
You know, your job is to stay back here." And he picks Spears. And Spears goes in and finds Lieutenant Dyke just catatonic and unable to make a decision, which I have the scene right here, and we'll watch it real quick. It's just a very quick clip.
Sir, we are sitting ducks here. We have to keep moving. We've got to keep moving. I'm taking over.
I cut those two clips together to avoid the YouTube copyright gods. I cut out the bit where Winters is told to stop running toward them and pick Spears, and Spears comes running up and he sends him in. But that was Spears. Then after he was told the order, he comes running up and he relieves Dyke. In the show, it is said after this incident, a few minutes later, that the hay bale is hit by a shell or something and Dyke is killed, and everybody kind of like laughs it off like, oh, well, thank God for small blessings, which is sadly, it's a very Hollywood thing to do. In reality, Dyke was hit running toward Foy, landed by the hay bale. Some people suspect that it was him getting hit in the arm or whatever it was that rattled him, and he couldn't function and froze. After that, he was taken off the line, and he was given a position after that somewhere else. And I don't think he ever saw combat again during the war, but he did recover. But he wasn't killed, but he did freeze. Like, he did freeze, and Spears did relieve him.
Yep.
At that point, we have the moment that you and I have been wanting to get to this whole time. And I want you to set this up for us, because I know how much you love this moment. So I have the clip ready to go.
So just before we get there, Spears, I love the way that, like, Colonel Sink, like, he really reprimands Captain Winters for, you're like, God damn it, you don't go out there. You're battalion commander, So Winters just turns around and he's like, Spears, get over here. Spears comes running over and he's like, go and take over that attack. Spears doesn't even speak to him. He just turns and runs off with his Thompson and hand grenades. Arrives there, and I love the line delivery of, I wish I knew this actor's name. The delivery of this, like, when he just turned, I'm taking over. That's all Lipton needed to hear. And then he delivers what we call QBOs, quick battle orders. This is not planned, meticulous orders that follow a set process. I'm going to fill everyone's head with acronyms today. SMEAC is the way you develop a set of orders. SMEAC is situation, mission, execution, admin, and comms. So they're like the parts of the orders and the way in which you deliver. So for an attack on Foy, you might prepare and you might be delivering orders for 2 hours. Then when the plan changes, because Dyke is shot or catatonic or whatever he is, that's when you got to do quick battle orders. And the way these orders are delivered, and he's like, no, forget about that. I want mortars and machine guns, until the guy on that roof is gone. A series of orders, and then everyone else follow me.
Right.
I love the way that is all delivered with quick battle orders. And the attack gets moving again. The troops get up there. It's that leadership, it's that follow me kind of leadership, and they make it to the first kind of buildings on the edge of Foy. And then someone says to Spears, I Company got sent around. We're going to lose them. And he's like, that's right. Wait here. And then the most surreal moment for me, this is the most surreal moment of the series. But this is the sort of thing that happens in war. Have you got the clip?
I do. Let's just play it.
Yeah.
At first, the Germans didn't shoot at him. I think they couldn't quite believe what they were seeing. But that wasn't the really astounding thing. The astounding thing was that after he hooked up with I Company, he came back.
Yeah, he ran through the Germans like they weren't even there. They didn't even know what was happening at first. They were confused.
Yeah.
He links up with them. He doesn't bother with hand signals over the wall to Lipton. He comes running back right through the gauntlet again, and they can't hit him again because even they probably couldn't believe what they were seeing. And it gets back to that thing we talked about in the Band of Brothers book, where they talk a little bit about how Spears just kind of knew how to move. You talked about it. I think you called it situational awareness, where he just knew how to move and run, and it was all instinctive. That wasn't something necessarily that's trained or learned. It's just who the guy was.
Yeah.
You know, he blooms in a crisis. This guy.
Yeah, and I remember being on Special Forces selection, where you go through what we call the hills phase. You spend a month in the Brecon Beacon Mountains in Wales. I did a winter selection course. It's horrendous weather and extremely mountainous terrain. And basically, you're given these routes to cover, but you're only given like one checkpoint at a time. So it's like, get to that checkpoint. When you get there, you get to the next. So you never know how far you're going. But basically, you spend a long time climbing up really, really steep mountains like Penny Fan, and you lose a lot of time on the uphill. So the only way you can pass these marches, these timed marches each time, is that when you get to the flats and the downhills, you've got to run. So many people come off selection because they injure themselves running down hills, because these are rocky mountains.
Yeah.
And you start running down a hill with a 55-pound Bergen on your back, and you don't plant your feet properly, you're going to get injured. I was not the fittest guy on selection. I would really struggle with the. I was fit, but there were guys on the course much fitter than me.
Yeah.
I would lose a lot of time, trying to climb these mountains. So when I got to the top, I was one of the guys who had to jog along the flat and run down the hills to make up time. And I just had this ability to run down the side of an 800-meter high mountain down a rocky, like, goat path with a backpack on, almost sprinting. And I never even rolled an ankle.
Wow.
It's the situational awareness of foot placement. Sometimes I would be running past other soldiers who might be struggling. They might have, taken a knee to rest and bounce around them. And it's like ended up being Colonel Spears or Captain Spears. He would have had that, being able to. He knows where all the Germans are. He would have known that the artillery crews, they don't look like they've actually got weapons in their hands because they're trying to load shells in. They're not going to spin around a field artillery piece. But how that guy did not get a Congressional Medal of Honor for that action, astounds me to say.
Similarly, Winters did not get a Congressional Medal of Honor for his actions at the Crossroads, which blew people away. And I found out that it had to do with the guy in charge who would have made those recommendations within the 101st. He had this weird attitude that he was only going to recommend one guy in one company during a campaign or during an operation. So because that was part of Market Garden, there was only one company within the 101st that had somebody recommended for the Medal of Honor, because that was his weird rule. He's like, I won't recommend multiple people. And then decades later, there was a grassroots push to get Winters a Medal of Honor for that action at the Crossroads. And Winters turned it down. He said, look, you guys do whatever you want. You can campaign for whatever you want to do. He's like, but I'm not going to endorse this. He said, because that was me there with my men doing what I needed to do. Ribbons and recognitions were assigned at that time. That was, and I don't need further recognition, 50, 60 years later. So it never came to be. Wes Robinson, thank you for the super chat. He says, Tony, thank you for sharing this story with us. I assume
you're welcome.
Right.
So
let me so we are caught up on that. The final sequence in this episode, last time we showed a little bit of Shifty and Lipton snuffing out a sniper from the upper window. And then Lipton is kind of talking to Spears about how Spears should lead Easy Company because they need a leader that inspires them. And Lipton is so inspired by Spears and everything he's seen him do. And then Spears delivers to him the revelation that he didn't recognize in himself, where he said they already had that leader in you. You were that guy for them when Dyke was not there. You were there the whole time Dyke was an empty uniform, and we're recommending you for a battlefield commission to lieutenant. And that's that episode where you see as Spears narrates the fallout from Bastogne and the Battle of the Bulge, you see members of Easy Company disappear from the pews in the church. You know, they either it was Toy and Garnier who were hospitalized, or Muck and Pincala were killed, and Hubler was killed, and all that kind of stuff. And to your point earlier about Garnier and Toy being taken off the line, and Malarkey running up to them, and then he says they got Garnier this time. That actually happened between those men. That was Malarkey running up to him in reality. And for his whole life, Malarkey couldn't talk about it, even in interviews. He was like, I shouldn't talk about this. Like, I can't talk about this. So that brings us to the, sorry, go ahead, Tony, go ahead.
I was just going to, Malarkey was close friends with Muck, Pincala, Joe Toy, Bill Garnier, Buck Compton. You get to the end of the Battle of the Bulge, they're all gone. Yeah. All of them are gone.
A lot of the Toccoa men by that point are gone.
I believe Donald Malarkey is, of all the members of Easy Company, is the one that spent the most time on the front line of any other soldier in the company.
Yeah.
Never got wounded, never went to a hospital. And that really.
Because who was it Winters brought off the line temporarily? Was it Luz? Did he take Luz off the line at Bastogne just for a little while and made him his orderly?
No, the doc.
Oh, was it the doc that he did that? Okay.
Oh no, he offers it to Donald Malarkey,
right.
And he refuses. That's after he's seen his friend Hubler shoot himself, and then he gets given Hubler's pistol, and
because
it gets offered to him, but he doesn't take him up on the offer.
In the historical reality, I believe it's Luz or Liebgott. I can't remember which one, but they spend like 2 or 3 days. Winters asked them to come help him out with stuff. And he did it because he recognized that they were just kind of on the ragged edge. And he talks about how sometimes that's all it takes to keep a guy from losing it. Like, it just getting him out of that hellish rhythm, that hellish pattern. And that was all it took. Bobby Valla, thank you for the super chat. He says for Spears. Yeah.
Thanks, Bobby.
So we are now in the end of, yes, he did. He also got a decoration for the Crossroads, Don. He was decorated for the Crossroads action as well. It just wasn't a Medal of Honor. Yeah,
so I think Silver Star, I think.
We're now at the end of this, and we're headed into the final, essentially the final third of Band of Brothers. Any parting thoughts, Tony, before we end this stream on this chunk of the miniseries?
For anyone who hasn't experienced real combat, this is one of the best depictions that I've seen. And even though this is set in 1944, 1945, and the world has advanced, technology has advanced, soldiers these days, their weapons are more sophisticated, an artillery shell still explodes in the same way, and it still does the same damage. And when you see the clip that you showed earlier of Muck and Pincala taking the direct hit, I see this middle-aged woman from Kansas who was carrying our laundry.
Right.
There's nothing left. So I can look past the historical inaccuracies that are in this television show because it's 80% more accurate than any other Hollywood production.
Right.
I can look past all of that because of the important underlying message that it's showing and teaching people. Like I can't think of another film that's actually, and I know this isn't a film, it's a TV show, but it's
right.
It's shot like a cinematic film.
Right.
I can't think of another movie that's shown a direct hit to a foxhole before. Like, you know, where literally humans are just obliterated. Yeah. So I suppose my parting thoughts on this kind of middle 4 episodes is that as difficult as they can be to watch, I feel it's important that people do watch these shows. If there are still people in the chat who are watching us two idiots talk about this show as opposed to watching because the actual show, if you haven't seen it, I think I said it in the last show, this will be the only time I tell someone not to watch Retro Blasting.
Right.
You need to go and watch that show and then come and watch these later down the line. It's
my message will be the opposite when we get to Private Ryan. I'll be like, don't watch Private Ryan, just watch our discussion about it.
Oh yeah. It'll be like it'll be almost be as though Michael joined me for my Book of Boba Fett video.
Oh yeah. It's gonna get some hate from some people. Picanti, that's his name.
I can never remember that guy's name.
Yeah, I can never remember Webster's name. So it's you know, there's always that guy you can't remember. And yes, to answer a question from earlier, when the three of them were in that foxhole and Spears walked up, Michael Fassbender is the guy playing Christensen. So young Magneto and young Professor X are both in Band of Brothers. Professor X getting killed at the village outside of Eindhoven.
Yep.
So
is young Venom, Tom Hardy.
Tom Hardy is in it, yes. Yep. There's
Simon Pegg.
Simon Pegg is in this, yeah. I think he gets killed in Meehan's plane, doesn't he?
Yeah. He's only in the first episode, and then not Damian Lewis, the actor who plays Sergeant Johnny Martin. He's gone on to become a pretty good director. He's done some more acting, but
and fun fact, the actor playing Johnny Martin was also the star, well, I should say the co-star in Kylie Minogue's Some Kind of Bliss music video. So there's that as well. Wow.
I did not know that.
Oh, but it probably doesn't surprise you that I did. So yeah.
No.
I knew that we were going to be talking about some heavy stuff in this. We've been talking about the 101st Airborne's and Easy Company's retreat during Market Garden, and we've been talking about Bastogne. I wanted to figure out a way to end this on kind of a slightly lighter note, this particular discussion. So, and I said so, but this is a transition, so it's not me starting a sentence with it, so it's valid. I'm making excuses, I know. I'm going to play a clip before we say goodbye, Tony. I just want everybody to see this clip now that they have the context for it. It is a clip from an upcoming episode that we'll talk about in part 3, but it has so much relevance, and Picanti is in it. So here we go. The final clip of this episode of War Stories.
Kind of reminds you of Bastogne.
Yeah, now that you mention it. Except, of course, there's no snow. We got warm grub in our bellies. And the trees aren't fucking exploding from crowd artillery, but yeah, Frank, other than that, it's a lot like Bastogne.
With that, thank you everyone for joining us tonight. Part 3 will be 2 Fridays from now. Is that right, Tony?
It's entirely up to you. I can do next Friday or the following Friday.
If you can do next Friday, I would love to do next Friday. But I know we want to do this every other Friday going forward at some point. So
beyond that, this weekend I've got 3 POA tomorrow. So
okay.
So if we do part 3 next week and then every 2 weeks beyond that works out perfectly. So
great. All right. Well, we will do part 3 this next Friday. So this coming Friday, after this Friday's over, the very next Friday, guys, at 5 p.m. Eastern time, part 3, the final part of our discussion on Band of Brothers. So Tony, thank you for joining me on this journey through
My
war
absolute
stories.
pleasure.
Yeah. And thanks everyone in the chat for being here and keeping it lively. And we'll see you all on the third and final part before we go into war movies and other war television shows.
Yep.
See you, everyone.